Just kidding. It's just the two of us. So first, Joshua Gutierrez, I stalked him on LinkedIn because I was so fascinated by the way that he speaks so authentically to his network on LinkedIn. I was so inspired to see him in his background. He comes from Inland Empire, moved on to college, went to work at Teach for America. I saw him work at Google, and now he has an awesome program that he's leading at Netflix. Super inspired by his story. And Joshua, I'd love for you to just give us a little bit of a background, intro on yourself, and tell us where you came from.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Jen. And I think this might be a good chance for me to go ahead and share a little bit about my deck as well, the presentation I have here. If we can pull that up. But yeah, as before we even kick it off, thank you sincerely, Jen and Alejandro, just for inviting me to this talk and being able to go. If you can go back a couple of slides there, Alejandro. Just really appreciate you all inviting me to this call. And I think there's so many things here already, Jen, that you mentioned about resources that folks can use. Like, I'm really hoping that, I think through this conversation, I'll have questions for all of you who are out there. And the biggest thing here is we want this conversation to be useful for you. So what advice or information are you looking for? And the reality being here is I'm just a connector. So whatever you ask or information you're looking for, the big thing I want us to walk away with today is to be able to connect with one another and to share this advice and information with one another. I'm not going to have all the answers. That's just the truth. And I don't have the answers. And most of the answers I get are because of the people I've been able to connect with. So I'll start a little bit just sharing about myself, but just want you to keep that in mind, like, really think about what you want from this call today, what kind of information or advice you're looking for, so that we can be able to curate this for you. And I think Jen and Alejandro really made that clear to me, that in these kind of conversations with Cura is just really think about how do we curate these conversations together to really fit your career needs. So first of all, again, my name is Joshua. I go by Josh as well, but I think my mom's on the call and she would get really mad if she heard me say Josh. So she says, your name is Joshua. But yeah, I invited my family because, they're of course part of everything that I do. But I'm the Pathways program lead here at Netflix. I'll tell you a little bit about my story and how I got here, and then we can go from there, Jen, and talk a little bit more. But I've only been at Netflix for about 4 months at this point, but I've been in the staffing, the human resources, the recruitment space for close to a decade. And in fact, I've been in the tech industry, for more than 9 years now. And the question for me is like, how did this Barstow boy, and I'll tell you more about where I'm from, end up leading a program at a major tech company? Well, it's really simple for me in the way that I've learned about my career and what I do is I've relied on my superpower, and I'm a connector. And what do I mean by being, first of all, what is a superpower? So when I mention your superpower, I'm saying, what is it that distinguishes you in the way that you collaborate and create with other people? What is it that you offer to the table, whether you're in analytics or you're a strategy person? Like, we all have our strengths and the things that we can really do well. I think it's important that we learn a lot of different skill sets, but really understanding who you are and what you do best is helpful. And what I will say here is, even if connecting is not your superpower the way it has been in mine, it's not like this was a natural thing. I mean, some of this was obviously learned, and I'll share that story with you. But I think really being a connector is extremely invaluable for everyone on this call. If I have any immediate tips on building a network or relationship management, it's being open to constantly make connections for other people. Because the reality here is that none of my success or the things that I've done have been in a silo. They've not been done alone. They have not been built by just me. That's not what this call and conversation is going to be about, because that's just not the case. I've always been open to sharing praise, the things that I've learned. The truth is, I'm standing on the shoulders of giants. Nothing I'm saying is brand new. This is all stuff that we have come up with together. So my number one tip in relationship building is to always remain focused on the we when you're thinking about the connection pieces. Now, let me say, first of all, it's really easy for me to say when I've established myself already in my career, in this connecting space. It's easy for me to say, like, oh, always be open to helping others and working with others. But there's a really interesting quote. I love this quote from RuPaul. I don't know if anybody likes RuPaul's Drag Race, but there's a quote out there: if you can't love yourself, how the hell are you going to love someone else? My tech version of that is if you can't support yourself, how the hell are you going to support somebody else? So it's really being mindful of the fact of what you need before you take on too much of the additional burden or needs for other people. So I'm here to say, again, I'm a connector. That's my skill set. I'm available for that. That is what I do, and that's what I'm here for. And I'm able to do that right now because I'm financially stable, well, all those kinds of things. But you have to take care of yourself first. And then another part of this, when we talk about the superpower piece, is just really trying to find your lane, build up your personal skill sets, find that financial stability before you can really commit to other people as well. Just keeping that in mind. But the bottom line is I found success in building for others along with myself over time. So to wrap this up on a little bit about this connector piece, the reason my superpower is because I've watched my family, especially my parents, really show me the importance of always building connections, specifically in caring for people in real non-transactional ways. So I want to just say it again, real non-transactional relationships are the number one most important part. I'm going to shout out somebody that was actually just messaged me on LinkedIn yesterday. He might be on the call, Bach. He messaged me on LinkedIn and I was responding to him after finish that, but he sent me this really thoughtful message. And I don't always have the time to respond to everybody on LinkedIn, it's true. But it was obvious that he was more interested in saying like, oh man, I'm really interested in learning a little bit more about your career, what type of advice or tips you have. You could tell it was less transactional. It was more about that. Hey, I want to like add you into my network, into my relationship so I can learn more about where you've come from. So just want to throw that out there. But if I was to sum up my role in one sentence, it would be my life's goal is to be an opportunity creator for Black and brown folks, to connect all of our peoples with opportunities, jobs, roles, to provide that generational wealth. And in my job at Netflix, I do this for emerging talent, folks like you yourself out there, mainly in technical roles, but the bigger picture always goes back to that connecting piece. So if you can go to the next slide real quick, Alejandro, and I'll try to wrap this up shortly. But to tell you a quick bit of my story, I was born and raised in the beautiful desert of Barstow, California. This was wonderful, but I did face significant educational challenge that are typical from high school students where I'm from. I was second in my class with a 4.2. My high school counselor told me, I will never forget it, my senior year, back in 2005. Yes, that's a long time ago. You're not going to get into a four-year college, so your best bet is going directly to community college. So that, as many of us here know, that the roles community colleges play are incredibly important for our underrepresented students. And many of us here went to community colleges, but I didn't have context into college, and my parents didn't know a lot about the hows and whys of college. And I had dreams of attending Stanford. Like that was my whole life's goal. So this type of news really broke me. I was 18. I didn't know what I was preparing for or planning for. I didn't know how to even think about college, let alone, knowing that I was now, my whole life was I was going to Stanford, and now I was told I'm not even going to be able to apply to school at all. If you go to the next slide, Alejandro. I was very lucky. There was an amazing former president of Cal State San Bernardino named Dr. Albert Carnig, and he had a scholarship for the top 1% of high school graduates in the district. And this was a revelation for my parents who weren't going to be able to support me through college. So now I didn't have to file for FAFSA or anything like that. I was able to get a full scholarship to college, which was amazing. But still, I was working part-time, I was going to school, I was being part of student organizations, and I had to keep up a 3.5 to keep my scholarship. And the truth be told, I had it really easy. Most of my friends at Cal State San Bernardino were around the IE. And like some of you here, they commuted hours to school 2 to 3 times a week. Those same friends would go right back to school when they weren't studying, when they go right back to work when they weren't studying or in school. And in addition, many of my friends didn't have a scholarship. So it wasn't like they could focus on being in student organizations or work on outside projects during their free time. So why do I tell that story? Well, it's because many of you might fit that description. Folks who are working full-time, going to school, studying all the time, putting in that work to help provide for your families. And that's the profile of somebody who is resilient, hardworking, values-oriented, and a leader in their family and community. So to tell you what my job is, to get it really clear, is my job is to go to these tech companies and these companies in general and say, why aren't we finding these folks, or why aren't we hiring these folks, these people? And I've worked with a lot of people over the years, from Ivy Leagues to state schools, from everywhere. And the number one factor I've seen for success is grit, resilience, and emotional intelligence. But we don't often hear about those experiences in itself being leadership or even business critical experiences. So my job, again, to go back to this, isn't just to share with you all of this advice, is to work internally to make sure these companies know, hey, if you're going to be successful, you need to recruit these folks as well. And these are the folks we need to hire. So just to wrap it all up, and if you go to the last slide, Alejandro, so I started at Teach for America. So before that, well, I was a recruiter at Teach for America in 2012. Before that, I taught middle school science on the Navajo Reservation, which is interesting. And in 2014, I joined Google's Eng Practicum recruitment team. So over those 8 years, I worked in a ton of different areas in university outreach across Google. And more recently, I led the Hispanic Serving Institution outreach team. And that's where we focused our efforts on decoding the tech industry to make hiring paths clear and accessible for folks. So that's what I do here at Netflix as well. My goal is to continue to diversify the tech and entertainment industries, specifically in finding people like us to fill these roles. But yeah, that's just a little bit about me. Outside of work, diehard sports fan, Raiders, Padres, Lakers, Liverpool soccer. I love hitting concerts, play a lot of pool and video games. But just really, I'm an extrovert who loves making connections. So regardless of what we have in this conversation, please find me on LinkedIn, add me, and let's connect and start to collaborate and work together.
That's awesome, Joshua. Thank you for that. Thanks for the introduction. I had a couple questions before we open it up to everybody. When you were growing up, I don't think the Netflix Pathways leader was one of the job offerings there. What did you want to be? What did you think about being? And tell us a little bit more about that.
This is funny because yeah, I really was trying to think about what I wanted to be when I was young. It's bad, my memory is not so great. I don't really remember when I was really young, but I do remember in high school I found this crazy passion where I wanted to be a forensic linguist. I don't even remember why, and it's so strange. I just remember researching it a ton. And these are people who this is pre-true crime era, by the way. I mean, this is literally people who see like a written note about, I'm gonna kill this person or whatever it might be, like something like that, and you find people based off of their handwriting. I have no clue why that's what I was interested in, but all I remember is I found somebody who was a forensic linguist. I interviewed them and they were like, you need to be an English major if you want to do this. So that was like my initial reasoning for being an English major, is I wanted to be a forensic linguist.
That's amazing. And as also an English major, I'm super excited when I see English majors in tech. How was it being an English major relevant for you?
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the things about your major, and especially when it comes to tech, obviously with tech, there's certain roles where you do have to be super technically proficient. There's, especially when it comes to the basic skill sets and the foundations of what it means to be an engineer, and depending on the role that you're applying for. But the reality is, I think when we think about these tech companies, what I see from especially the FANG companies is there's this certain area of what is really successful in the company, and it's people who can thrive under ambiguous situations, and people who can problem solve when something's set in front of them and can handle it, and are able to identify multiple ways of problem solving and really offer that solution. So I think being an English major, one thing that was good for me there was I learned how to analyze, I learned how to critically think, I learned how to look at literature and be able to, oh, this is why this was written this way, it was from this time period, and this is what they were trying to say, and these are all the ways that this book was shaped and formed by the systemic racism of the time, or whatever it might be. It's just being able to like analyze and think about that. And then the second part there, Jen, is writing. I think has been super foundational for the rest of my career, like just being able to communicate with people, being able to know the basic grammar structure, things of that nature have been really helpful. But yeah, I think being an English major was great just because most of it is about analysis.
Well, it makes sense, right? Because you're speaking to both sides. You're reaching out to the community. You're reaching out to really the younger you, right? And you're also having to navigate conversations with C-suite, C-level people that may have not had that exposure, that experience, or that cultural insight on there. So in a sense, you're a bit of a translator on both sides, speaking multiple languages.
Wow, that's actually a perfect way to put it. I'm going to steal that for the next time I share English major. Yeah, I think translating is a really good way to put it. I mean, you have to be able to just take in Yeah, exactly. Like I think that's actually a good kind of piece of this being this connector, this person, is you have to have that emotional intelligence to meet people where they're at, and wherever they're at in their career or where they're at in their life, and try to identify like what is it that they need, and help translate that for the company or the place that they're interested in applying, or the role they're looking for, and saying like, actually, I don't even know if you noticed this, but you said you did this in your career. If we were going to translate this into the role that you're applying for, here's how it completely connects. And it's really just trying to find that way to say like, actually, you already have those skill sets. It's just being able to transfer that knowledge to the company to let them know, like, I already do this.
I think that's it, right? And it doesn't stop, because if you're an engineer, you still have to learn how to speak business, right? And if you're in
Yeah.
marketing, you still have to learn how to speak tech.
Yep.
And so I think it's just a really powerful set that we're while we talk through this, a really practical piece of information to kind of know the language of where you're going into. I'm really obviously super impressed with your journey and where you've been. But I know it has not gone. Everyone sees the LinkedIn network, everyone sees the logos and thinks like, wow, that guy had it easy, right?
Mm.
But tell us a little bit about the challenges that you've had, and specifically, like, what are the challenges you have today? Like, what are you scared of? What gives you the Sunday scaries today?
Oh man, that's a good question. So let's see, like the challenges that I think I have today. I think for me, it's that, I mean, I'm mostly always trying to think of how are, oh, this is a good question. I'm trying to think of like my own personal fears and insecurities with the work, but also the challenges that I face in the work that I'm doing. I think for my own self, my constant worry is that I'm going to fail, to
Mhm.
be totally honest. I mean, I think I am always in this position where I'm thinking about, okay, I have to work to really ensure that other people are going to have opportunities. And if I'm not translating this information properly, I'm gonna keep using this translate because that works so well. If I'm not translating this information properly to, let's say, Netflix, which is where I'm at now, about the people that I'm connecting with, and being able to say, hey, this person would be great for this role or this job, then I feel like I'm failing those folks. And I think that is part of like the challenge that I have in this role is there's a real struggle in the industry right now. We're seeing the layoffs, we're seeing the economic downturn, and it's being able to say, all right, how can we help people find a career that's best for them, the career that they want to do, the career that they like to do, while also in this economy and in this situation that we're at, like particularly in this country, and it's like, if I don't do this right, I'm going to fail. The other part of that is, I think, that imposter syndrome, which I know we hear a lot of, but I like to talk about it because I just know so many people who are talented in this industry, and especially the most talented, amazing people who have just been laid off, and
Mhm.
people who do similar roles to me. And it's hard because I preach this message of we community all having to do this together. But truth be told, when we're talking about fears, it's easy to go into that competitive mindset, or like, oh man, this person's so much better than me at this. Like, why am I in this position? I shouldn't even be here. It should be this person. So, oh, there we go. But yeah, so I think that's when I think of fears, those are the main things that come to mind.
What do you tell yourself? Like when you're going through that and you're actually feeling that, what do you tell yourself just to sometimes even get through the workday?
That's a good question. So the first thing I do is I always think back to a few quotes. So I actually have a couple of them that I keep right next to me. One of those is Maya Angelou. She has a quote where she says, "I've written 11 books, but each time I think, uh-oh, they're gonna find out now. I've run a game on everybody. They're gonna find out." So like I just remember Maya Angelou had imposter syndrome. I'm like, if she had imposter syndrome, I'm gonna be okay. And then even Kendrick Lamar, who's like my absolute favorite rapper, he said, "My newfound." There's a song where he says, "My newfound life made all of me magnified. How many accolades I need to block denial. The shock value of my success put bolts in me. All this money is God playing a joke on me."
Mm.
And obviously, I have not had the life that Kendrick Lamar has had, but I think there's parts of that, like where I look at this guy is saying, how many accolades do I need to have before I block denial in myself? So I go back to these people who I know have also experienced this. And then I remember like two things, knowing that these folks are there. The other part is like, it's just ego. It's just me trying to blow myself up and feel like, that's the big thing. If I'm so focused on myself and these fears and insecurities, and like, how am I actually thinking of others first? And then, but tangibly, this one is the real one that I use, especially in these types of situations. Is there was this really great example that I saw at Google when we would talk about imposter syndrome, and the way you can picture it is like there's a giant circle, okay, and inside there's a smaller circle, and in that smaller circle is what we often think of as what I know, right? This is what I know. And then around us is everybody else, what I think other people know. And we always think other people know so much more than us. We always think that everybody has all the answers. And the reality is, and this is where this becomes tangible, if you can remove that ego and you can remove all that focus, is you start to think about, all right, what I know and what other people know tend to intersect. And if we were more quick to like put our own ego and our own issues to the side and just work with other people to actually solve a problem, we'll find out that we both have a lot to share with one another. So that's really what I think about when I get to these fears and those insecurities, especially around, the job that I'm doing particularly. But yeah.
I love that. I love the practical advice aspect, right? It's not just theoretical. And one thing that I've used in the past is like, I used to put so much pressure on myself. I'm in public relations, marketing, branding, have to host a lot of events, be at a lot of events and lunches and dinners. And I was so nervous about being interesting. And then I shifted to
Yep.
being interested in people. And the job's so much easier that way, right? The job is so much easier when you can just take that off of your job description. You don't have to be interesting, but if you're interested genuinely in someone else and you can build those relationships, then the rest of it unfolds, I think. What's a piece of
Love that.
advice? It's helpful. It's helpful. I'm happy to take more things off of my plate,
Well, I even think of when you said being interested, it reminds me of just listening actively,
Yes.
and how often we listen just to wait to respond, which I guess is kind of what I'm doing right now. Anyways, no, but I think of interested, I definitely think of that, listening actively and just taking in what the other person's sharing and seeing what you can pick up and learn from them. I think that's great advice.
What about I think about this a lot because it's the whole reason we started Cura, but like what advice would you give to your 20-year-old self?
Oh, that's interesting. I think the biggest one is just, I think one thing that I did a lot when I was 20 was, I mean, obviously we all procrastinate. And I don't think procrastination, I think, is a funny term, and there's a lot of ways to think about it, but I think it's mostly like I would stress a lot about things that I had to get done rather than just pushing through. Um, and I think particularly for the role that I'm in and a lot of the roles that people are looking at or interested in the tech industry, like there are things you have to just push through when you feel that challenge. Sometimes you have to just start an idea. You have to just start writing things down. You need to just actually put it on paper and really push through those feelings of, because it's like, again, going back to those insecurities, I'll get situated with a project or a contract or a partner or whatever it might be. And my first reaction is still the same as it was when I was 20, which is like, oh my gosh, I can't do this.
Mhm.
The difference is now is I'll go, oh my gosh, can't do this. Okay, let me just sit with this for a little bit and actually just start to work on it. When I was 20, I would look at this, oh my gosh, can't do this, and I would run away.
Mhm.
And then I would wait till the day before or the whatever it might have been and put together something pretty, as my dad would say, something half-ass, right? I think looking at that now in my career, I stare at something and I'll just stare at it, even if it's like annoying me or if I'm not sure I can solve it. I'll just stare at it. I'll write things down. I'll just start somewhere. I don't know, but that always just hit me a lot. When I was 20, I felt like it was really hard for me to start things, because problems always seemed really big. And I think I'm getting better at just being able to just, all right, this is a challenge. I'm going to sit with this for a while and work on this, and not just run away from it.
I love that. It's so human of you, right? Because it's like we all go through it, but for some reason we all think we're the only ones that
Yeah.
that have that experience. I could ask you like 1,000 questions, but I'm going to open it up to everybody and share your wealth of knowledge. Does anybody have any questions for Joshua or just general questions about networking, tech, work, early career networks, or humaning. Okay. Perfect. Sorry. So, Ayana Spina.
Yes, hi.
Hi, Ayana.
Thank you both.
Tell us a little bit about yourself before the question. We're so curious to learn about all of you guys.
Yeah. So my name is Ayana. I'm currently in a software engineering bootcamp with General Assembly. I am graduating it in about 2.5 weeks, which is really, really exciting, but also really scary.
Yeah.
Especially because leading into my question, I'm beginning to look into jobs that are out there at the moment, and it almost seems like there would not be any in tech, considering all the things that are going on. And I guess I'm wondering, how does a boot camp grad stand out, like for these entry level roles, when you don't have the years of experience that even the entry level roles are stating that you need, but also all the people that you feel like are so much more qualified because they were already in these roles and now are looking for roles again.
Wow. I mean, that's first of all, Yana, that's definitely I mean, it's scary. It's a challenge, and definitely something that I've seen other folks, especially at your level where you're at in your career in this emerging space, have been at. So I think the first thing that I would think about is, you know, having that certification, having that that General Assembly boot camp. The good news here is that I think most companies now are starting to recognize how valuable that is, that certification. It's not just about having to go to, college or having those years of experience. And the other part here is there is a lot of entry level roles that are available, but they might not necessarily be at these FANG companies right away, especially for what's happening right now in these companies. I think there's other companies that are actually hiring that are outside of these. I've seen some good resources. Let me follow up with you though, Ionic, if you could reach out to me. I know that there are some groups and teams and folks who are actually starting to pull together a list of opportunities and jobs. I want to say I heard Angel List recently. I also, gosh, I'm trying to think of all the different avenues there, but I mean, the truth is that, yeah, it's just definitely a scary time. The other part too is like when you're thinking about the job you want to apply for, and I'll just give you this tangible piece. Thinking beyond just the fact that you did this boot camp, like what are the things that you actually did in the boot camp? So when you're listing this out on your resume, making sure that you're being very clear at like what you actually built, what core language that you used, and what it resulted from. And that could be things like projects that you built through the boot camp. Because ultimately what these companies are looking for is just, do you have that foundational skill set? Are you able to code in in the basic programming language that you did the boot camp in? And do you have some experience with that? Now, the truth and reality on this is that again, going back to some of the maybe larger tech companies and what they're hiring for, they might not be hiring directly for your skill set just yet. So it's maybe looking at what are some of the more immediate experiences that you can get in the tech industry, and what kind of experiences can you get with the company? Because truth be told, right now, I would just work really hard to get hired somewhere, but beyond these larger tech companies. But yeah, let me be there to help you with that too. So feel free to reach out to me directly. I also want to open this up to other people. Is there anyone out there that has some advice or thoughts on this? Okay.
That's a good point, Josh. Yeah, we should have we have some folks that have been in this space before and might have some information. Bach, do you have a comment on that?
Joe was in the queue first. If you want to go ahead, Joe, go with.
Well, I guess I had another question, but also I guess to kind of address what you were saying too. My girlfriend was actually in the same boot camp that we're in now. I'm in the UI design boot camp through GA, and her first job and second job now were both at startups, and she had no prior design experience at all. So a lot of times startups are looking to get people that just have pretty basic experience, but It's more about demonstrating that you have the skills to do the job. She only had a year of experience or a year and a half of experience and is now a lead designer.
Wow, that's awesome.
Because the company that she didn't think she was going to get the job, she applied just to kind of see what would happen. But in the interview process, they interviewed a lot of people and they said, like, you just look like you demonstrated exactly what we're looking for. Like, you know how to apply concepts. But also my question was, what was the interview process like at a big company like Netflix? Because I've seen the startup kind of process, but I'm curious how it is there.
Joe, thank you so much. Also, not just for the advice you gave too, because it also, it made me realize it kind of combines to your question here, Joe, which is when I talk to engineers across the companies, and I'm going to bring up my Google experience, I'll bring up my Netflix experience, especially the folks who are hiring folks for their teams. It's really interesting to me. What I feel like I'm trying to solve at this overall in this tech industry is how to make the interview process more accessible for folks. Because ultimately, when I talk to these people, I get a lot of the similar answers, which is like, oh, I was this kind of major. I didn't really have experience in this type of code, or I didn't have experience with this type of programming or this type of team or this type of blah, 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 but I was able to learn it. And I think that's a really key part of what these industries are looking for. This industry is looking for are people who can learn on the fly, learn quickly, when they're dealt with ambiguous situations or things that might not necessarily be as clear, like you're able to actually dig in and try and find those solutions. So what does that tangibly look like? Well, when I think about a company like Netflix, right, the interview process is very similar to what you would face at most companies. You'll have a technical interview, you'll do some basic technical coding, but then it's really the interviews that are beyond that when they get into more of this like computational thinking. Like, are you able to translate those, these problems and be able to collaborate with your interviewer? So when I think about these interviews, it's really not going in saying, I'm going to give them the answer. Like, don't be afraid of, not having that exact answer that they're looking for. What they're more interested in the interview is how do you collaborate? How do you communicate? So when they're offering a problem, let's say that they give you the problem, how are you able to look at that and say, this is interesting. Okay, so I'm thinking what I would do here is the first step I would take is this, right? You're talking out loud, you're sharing with them. This is the first step I would take. And then looking at the problem and saying, I'm actually not sure what I would do in this next portion of it. What do you think we should go with here? And it's really just having that collaborative conversation with the engineer. Again, I got to be honest, you're going to have those foundational technical skills, that algorithmic thinking. But at the same time, if you're able to demonstrate, and I think going back to Joe, your partner, hearing about her experience, it's clear that, maybe she didn't have those initial skills when she went into, her first role, but over time, because she was able to reason and able to collaborate and work with her team, communicate well with them, she's already in a leadership position. So that's what I would think of with the interview process. Some of the things you can do are, the basics, right? Like you can go on Leak Code, you can practice a lot of the technical problems there. But I think some of the harder parts of this come back down to the interview. And the reality is when you interview at a Netflix or a Google or wherever it might be, you're going to have to, there's a barrier for entry, right? You apply and you're going to get sent something like a code signal, some sort of assessment to ensure that you're going to be able to perform in the interview. So I would think about practicing for those types of assessments, because they're going to be important for you to be able to get to that interview process. And then when you get to the interview, for those of you who have been there, a few pieces of advice. First, make sure you are really building that relationship with your recruiter. How are you doing? How's your day going? I'm very excited to be working with you. When they ask you your questions or when they give you the email and they're telling you the details in the interview, read it closely. Make sure you're responding to them with what they're asking for. And then just being able to know that your recruiter, the way that they are measured at work is if you're hired or not. So always remember that they're there to collaborate with you. So think about it from that sense. Like, hey, are you, what kind of advice would you have for me? I'd be really fascinated to know, what you think I should do for the interview. A lot of times they have resources, they have things to share with you. Now they're also really busy. They have a lot of candidates and folks that they're working with, but no one has ever feels bugged as a recruiter. And if they do, they're probably in the wrong role. The truth is that, ask your questions, they're there to help you get hired. And then when you get into the interview, going back to what we were talking about earlier, collaboration is key. How are you communicating? What kind of decisions are you making? Are you somebody that has good judgment? That's what the interview team is looking for. Obviously, again, foundational technical skills, that computational thinking, but really showing them, demonstrating that you can collaborate and communicate and partner is the key part, because you can learn all the other stuff. But yeah.
Super helpful. We're going to go to Bach and then Shayla and then Carlos question from chat. Bach?
Hi, yeah. So first of all, thank you for hosting this event. I'm back and I'm in my early career in software engineering. And I want to add to the question from Ayana Asmina, is that I think that startups, when you work at these companies, you have a lot of roles to kind of play in. And that is because in bigger tech companies, you would be structured what you need to do and what you're capable of. But in startups, you would be doing more things than you would need to. And that means that the large part of it is that you're getting more experience. Yeah. So yeah, to my question is that, so I have been always the type of person to focus on what I want to do and not to spend too much time playing or chit-chatting, I say. And because of that, I have always kind of just dig into more and more deeper into coding. But lately, I've seen that a lot of the things that maybe senior or staff software engineer for the higher roles, the most important thing to them seems to be soft skills. And I have been kind of more open to like communicating with my friends or colleagues or peers at my bootcamp. And that has really opened a lot of like new connections to me. And it seems like to other industries as well, like the communication, the interaction, and the connection that you make is really important. So I want to ask that, is that true in even bigger tech companies?
Yeah, I would say it's even more true, Bach. And I think, first of all, thanks so much for your question. And you were the person I was talking about earlier because you sent such a thoughtful response to me on LinkedIn in the advice and the way that you were asking for it. So if anybody wants more advice, Bach's a great person to turn to here on that. And I would say you're already doing a great job on that. One thing about soft skills is, I don't know, just that term, we use it all the time. I think people skills is what I like to use it as, because the reality is when it sometimes is really easy to look at, like, I think it's easy for us to say these technical terms, especially when it comes to programming, that, yeah, you need to have these foundational skills, but they're only successful when they're paired with these people skills. So if you're unable to code in a community or with other people or program with other folks, then I think this is probably going to be a tougher for you, because these bigger tech companies, you have to collaborate. You have to work with other folks. You have to work in a team. You have to be able to partner. And that requires you to, be able to collaborate, one, but what that means is you have to have that emotional intelligence. You have to recognize, where your teammates are coming from. You want to try to build that community with them. That's very, very important. I think that when we talk about these people skills, that's what we're always talking about, is that collaboration piece. And it's the most important thing for the big companies. I actually think for smaller companies, maybe not. I mean, it might be the avenue for you if you're somebody who wants to work alone. And Bach, this is not just for you, but for anybody on the call. But when it comes to these major tech companies, that's what they're looking for: people who can come in, be able to learn on the fly, like that growth mindset, being able to take feedback, be able to grow from that. If you're somebody who is not able to work well with others, that first time you get feedback, you might be like, what? I know more than you, so really being able to have that perspective to know that you always have an area you can grow and be better at is going to be crucial. So yeah, definitely true. Thanks, Bach.
One more thing I'd like to add to that is, Bach, I also think, given Joshua's feedback, that part of your superpower, right, if you're more towards the introverted side, is to be genuinely curious, right? You don't have to be an extrovert to be connected. I think really what you've done was so well is maybe something that people don't always do for Joshua, is really just ask sincere and thoughtful questions. So don't underestimate your superpower of curiosity as well.
Oh, couldn't said it better myself. That's perfect, Jen. Wow. And gosh, there's so many things about that are important, especially when it comes to being introverted and, you know, some of the fears that might come from that. I know a lot of folks in tech might feel that way. I have a lot of people in my human resources and staffing who might seem like the most outgoing folks in the world, but they're also introverted. And it's really, you know, it's just really knowing what works best for you and how to help in those situations when you're putting yourself out there like you are, Bach. Like if especially if you're somebody who's introverted and you're putting yourself out there and you're trying to do these things that might be not as comfortable for you, like it's going to be good for you in the long run because you're learning new skill sets, but at the same time making sure that you spend time to charge that battery, get some time for yourself, and make sure that you're good too.
Shayla, next question.
Oh, hi. Hi, Josh.
Hey,
Thank
Shayla.
you for coming today. It's really nice to see you again. I was also a student at Pathways Bootcamp, so I appreciate all that. And also appreciate Cura for being able to host this event. And my question's kind of similar to Bach, so I appreciate bringing that up too, because I think being able to connect with people is one of the most like essential parts, and not just the business realm and networking, but just being able to like learn more about people and connect. So kind of with that being said, so like as a first generation student myself, it can be really intimidating meeting people in the professional realm when you're like first entering that space and like trying to show your authentic self. I think it can be like kind of a vulnerable and intimidating process. And so I really appreciate that you mentioned making non-transactional connections as well, because that was one of my goals when I was like talking to my mentor about what I wanted for my future, especially given like how the business landscape can feel at times. And I also really appreciate how like Jen mentioned being interested in people is like really helpful advice as well. So I was kind of wondering if you had any other advice when it comes to making authentic relationships.
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question. And again, I want to put this out there that again, we're a community here. So if other people have ideas here, please raise your hand and throw these out there, because I'm not the one with all the answers. We all have the answers here. Are you asking more specifically for like in the tech industry or just in general when it comes to building relationships or those kinds of non-transactional relationships?
I would say more so in tech.
Yeah, like if you're like looking for a role, or maybe if you're trying to find a job, basically. Yeah, this is a good question. Well, first of all, coming to things like this and putting yourselves in communities are my number one piece of advice. I think just getting a chance to meet folks, put your name out there, actually connect with them is a super important part of it. I think I mentioned this earlier too. The ways that this is translated in my own career has really just been taking risks with the different types of roles that come my way. So my pathway has been all over the place. I was a teacher and then I got into recruitment. So that direction only came from being able to, when opportunities came my way, say, yeah, sure, I'm interested in learning more about that. So yes, in the tech industry, that can be a little different because most roles, especially for what you're doing, I think you're in UX, right? You're in design. Yeah. So your role is pretty specific from a skill set perspective. But at the same time, I think it's like when you're out there looking to connect with like just a tangible piece of advice here, if you're looking to find roles or opportunities in the UX space, one thing I've told my mentees is actually just like searching on LinkedIn for folks that are in that world, and then sending a message that is thoughtful in a way that's asking for more, to learn more about what they have done and how they have progressed in their career. people like talking more about themselves. So if you ask them about themselves and learn, hey, I'm just curious, how did you get into this position? Would love to hear more about your experience. They're more willing and able to connect with you when you come across as more fascinated and interested in them. And that's not a lie. I think you are fascinated and interested in them. I don't think it's wrong to have a technique in thinking about this. But that's just the successes that I've seen. And I can give a clear example. My partner, I don't know if she might be on the call, but my wife, when I first got my job at Google, we had to move across the country. We were living in Boston, and she was working at the time for a nonprofit, but she was also like, oh gosh, I need to find a new role. We're moving all the way to San Francisco. And so she just started reaching out to folks in her network and people that she had connected with. This is pre-LinkedIn, so it's I think even more feasible nowadays. But she just put it out there like, hey, I'm just interested in learning about what you do. And at the time, she reached out to the founder of Code 2040, if any of you are familiar with that. And she was like, hey, I'm interested in learning about what you all are doing and what you're thinking about. And she ended up being one of the first people Code 2040 hired. And that was really because she just put herself out there, asked and was curious about what the role looked like. And I think we can do that on LinkedIn as well. I know it's a basic piece of advice. And I know some of you out there are like, I've been doing this for a long time, Josh. Like, I've been banging my head against the wall. I've been reaching out to recruiters. I'm not getting the response I want. What I would say here is, try to continue being diligent in that. If this is an area that you're finding particularly difficult, shoot me a message on LinkedIn. Maybe this is something we could think about together. Cura, whoever wants to get involved in this, it's like, what kind of messages work well for recruiters on LinkedIn, or what kind of messages are helpful, or get more of a push. But yeah, any other thoughts in the group chat here?
That's a really good point. I mean, and I think that is something we can put together a newsletter on that to give some helpful tips and send out to everybody. Just go to cura.us, sign up for the newsletter, and we'll send out more information. One practical tip that we have found to be really helpful is the more senior level someone gets, the more generally exposure they have, right? They've been on podcasts, they've been on events, they've been in the news. Google them, right? Google them, find something that they've appeared on, find a panel that they've appeared on, and show them that you're following them. Hey, I saw that you went to this event in Vegas, really cool conference. Would love to learn a little bit more about this part that you talked about. The difference between somebody receiving that and somebody receiving like just an anonymous, connection from LinkedIn is really powerful. I think that's tip number one, is like, the more you can research and find somebody and know a little bit about them, the more likely it is to have a human connection and relationship. And tip number two, keep joining groups on LinkedIn. Cura has started one, but there's thousands, right? So if you go into like Latinas in tech or engineering, or just even like random ones, right? Go and build your network, because when you have something in common with somebody else, you're more likely to get approved from them or to get a conversation. So I think it's about the personal aspect of it, and also using the algorithm of LinkedIn to increase your reach and superpower. So continue to come to conversations like this and other ones and build your network on doing that.
Yeah, but just thank you, Jen. That was perfect. But yeah, Shayla, just keep with that mindset too. Just keep that mindset that, you're here to build, and just to take it back to what we said at the beginning, like, network is great. And we love that term because we do all have networks, but I just try to switch in your head to that relationship building, that you're there to build a relationship with a person, to help them, to help yourself, to build a community, to collaborate, to work together. If you keep that mindset, I think you're always going to be successful. It's not the best, it's not the mindset that you hear from like folks who are in part of hustle culture, or, grind and do it. That's fine. And I think that's one avenue to take. But I look at this as like, we can all work together on this, and we can solve this together if we're working and we're communicating with each other well. So yeah, I just appreciate that mindset.
Thank you. Thank you both for everything that you're sharing with your experience. I really appreciate the community aspect of all of it too. So yeah.
Thanks for the feedback, Shayla. we're just getting started and building based off of what your needs are, right? So we hope to kind of do this in a real-time feedback loop of however we can best be of service. Carla, I want to go to your question. How do you stay connected with your community? As a young professional in tech, I find it challenging to connect with my community, especially due to remote work. So timely right now, right? Anybody out there in this group have information on that? What do you all do to stay connected during remote work?
Love that.
You can go ahead and just respond if you have a answer or a clue. We don't have to have the full response. We're just looking for clues for some of this stuff as well.
I would just throw my 2 cents in there and say I've been working with US companies from Colombia for 15 years. So I really have had to try really hard to stay connected to my network and grow it step by step. And that's how I got to Jen and now to Joshua and now to you all. Just keep showing up. I think what Josh said about being part of the communities, go to the mastermind, go to the event, go say hi. It's hard. It's hard. I'm a little bit extroverted, but it's still hard for me just to go and reach out to people. And what Jen says, do the homework, do the research, and approach people saying, hey, I saw what you said here, and it really impacted me. That makes a huge difference. So putting yourself out there is staying on top of mind of the connections. Definitely, that's what has worked for me.
I love that. Oh yeah, Luisa. Yeah, I was gonna just comment on that, Jen.
Love that. Great advice. I mean, it kind of like recreates a little bit of the dorm room feel too, right? When everyone's kind of in a close proximity, that really helps.
And MLH, so Major League Hacks, they have tons of remote hackathons that are happening at all the time. So like if you want to join a remote hackathon, there's probably one this weekend. But that's for our technical folks here. For those of you who are not necessarily technical, yeah, I think what Alex said is perfect. It's just really thinking about, I don't know, that keep showing up is so important. It's kind of like the motto for life in a lot of ways, in those difficult, challenging, scary moments, and you just show up anyways, even though it's tough. Again, I want to use some piece of advice from my partner. One thing that she's done, in her career search and when she was looking for roles and opportunities, one of our friends gave us this advice of send 20 emails in a week. Now, again, that could be LinkedIn nowadays, but especially for folks who might have been laid off, it sounds really intimidating. It sounds very scary. But when we're out here looking for something, looking for opportunity, maybe put a number on it to give yourself a metric to think about how to help progress. And that 20 emails a week was really helpful. It has been really helpful for her. And I think about that with LinkedIn too. Maybe just send 20 LinkedIn messages a week. Put yourself in those positions, whether maybe that's go to 3 different talks during the week, whatever it might be, but just keep showing up, keep pushing forward, even when it's uncomfortable, even when you hit that wall. Yeah.
That's awesome. We have time for one more question. Ruben Alcaraz.
Hi. Hi, everyone.
Hey, good to see you, Ruben.
Good to see you too. Well, first and foremost, to Jen, thanks for the invite, and for Josh, thank you for taking time out of your day for this. I guess the question for me is that, I guess in my circumstance, I've always been fortunate enough to have a form of work in the tech field. It's mostly contract, it's just like random positions that I always said I never found tech, it found me apparently. And I've always been stuck in this weird little limbo, as I like to call it. Like I can never get to the next step of like securing a full-time versus like a contract. It's just, I guess, like, based on the information that everyone provided today, I guess just the question, like, what can someone in my case do to, like, I don't know, I guess, like, get a better chance of like landing a full-time job, or just like, because I've been trying my best. Like, is it a resume thing? Is it just like everyone was saying, like a network thing, connecting with the right people thing? Is it just experience, or is it all the above? Or
I think from all the advice we've taken today and the things we've heard here, it's probably a combination of a variety of those things, but also you're not the only person who's been in that position, Ruben. Like I know people who have just jumped from contracting job to contracting job and do that pretty consistently, especially in tech. Like it's when you're in your emerging career and you're still trying to build that up. That sounds really uncomfortable, and I can hear that that's a challenge for you that you're dealing with. Why don't you follow up with me directly and we can talk more about it? Because that way we can look at your resume and just think about like what kinds of things we can do to improve. I think there's a few more questions I would have for you personally, to identify like what we can do. But again, I just don't want you to worry. Like I have people in my life and people I've worked with who have been in that position, who have worked from contract role to contract role in these tech companies and are in similar positions. And it's worked out for them. And again, we're in this position where the tech world is a little funky, but don't worry that's the situation. The reality that you're getting the contract roles, that's a great thing. That means that you're doing successfully, you're doing good, that they want to hire you. The full-time parts are just a challenge when it comes to any of these tech roles. So yeah, I think it might be more specific to your particular situation, but I'm happy to provide some thoughts for you specifically. I don't know, does anybody else have any thoughts in this situation? Questions here?
No, it's a good, fair question, Ruben. It's
It's
tough.
a really fair question.
And
Yeah,
thank you for the advice.
A
And
lot
yes,
of
Cura Chat.
network helps too, right? Is something sometimes as simple as ask, right? Whoever's in charge of hiring, make sure that they know you want a full-time job, right? Make sure that they are not just reading your resume, but they personally know, or sometimes people on the team have more influence than you think. Hey, I want to be here. How do I do it? Raise your hand.
Jen, you know what oh, sorry to interrupt you, but I'm thinking about something here. What do you think about maybe what I can do, especially for the people who are here? I can try to throw together some office hours, maybe a couple of hours where I can get like 15 minutes with folks who might be interested. Because I think this is a good question, Ruben, and I'm happy to review your resume and talk with you about it.
That would be awesome.
Okay, remind me of that, Jen.
Yep, I'll
do it. Okay, great.
Work it. And what we do a lot of times through Cura is we just put a Cura coffee chat in the LinkedIn request so that they know that they've already gone through this first step of meeting you, and it won't be a waste of your time, and that people are legit and filtered. So I would recommend putting Cura coffee chat in a LinkedIn note to Joshua, and any help you need, please feel free to email me directly too. elena.jennifer@gmail.com, or sign up for our Cura.us newsletter and you'll see my information there as well. We hope you guys all have really enjoyed this conversation and have found it worth your time. We really want you to join our community because we want you guys to start helping out other people too. Even just the information that we all have. I mean, we're all part of the puzzle pieces and solving some of this stuff. So you never know who you can solve a problem for and who will solve one for you. Have some faith and let it unfold a little bit. But thank you all so much. Joshua, really, really, really fruitful conversation. Thank you for your time. We hope you'll be back with us again one day.
Yeah, happy to. Just really glad to be able to connect with all of you and keep at it. Like Jen said, just keep being resilient and know that there are a lot of other folks facing similar challenges or being in situations as you. You're not alone. You have a community to work with. Rely on us, lean on us, reach out to us.
Reach out to us, guys, and follow Cura on LinkedIn. Cura on LinkedIn, Alejandro, I think, posted it. And tell us what you want to hear. Who else do you want to hear from? We're happy to start inviting speakers that you want. Bye.
Thank you all. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Jennifer. Thank you, Alejandro. Take care.
Thank you, Raul. Good to see you.
Good to see you too, man. See when you come
Bye-bye.
down here. Adios.
Yes, we'll talk again. Joshua, amazing. Thank you so much.
Appreciate you.
Thank you so much.
I'm going to go ahead and hop off, but it was great connecting with you.
Go for it. We'll
See you
talk
later.
later. Take care.
Bye.
Bye.